समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
This weekend, the world watched in horror as a record-breaking 150,000 people gathered in central London to mourn the death of an American most may never have heard of, the right-wing activist Charlie Kirk. The rally drew unprecedented numbers of people demanding an end to immigration, some demanding that existing immigrants be thrown out. But the shock is misplaced. There have been tensions over race and immigration slowly simmering, not seen in cities like London, but very much present out in the rest of the country. And those tensions can no longer be deferred. So what's going on, and what will it mean for a country that more than any other has represented multiculturalism and diversity in our times? I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. I'll be talking you through the history of England's little known but savage war within. The words did not lend themselves to ambiguity. The mere use of these words the judge observed in front of the jury were therefore not necessarily inflammatory. Case closed. The politician walked free. A year after it was elected to power with the largest parliamentary majority seen since 1997, the United Kingdom's Labour government is realizing that it's being dismantled from within. The 150,000 people who marched in London to commemorate right-wing propagandist Charlie Kirk were not connected to one party in particular. They might not even have had strong feelings for Charlie Kirk, who, until news of his murder in America broke, had little presence in the United Kingdom. But a movement has been coalescing, propelled from forces in America and around Europe. Elon Musk, appearing on a satellite link, warned of, I quote, a rapidly increasing erosion of Britain brought with massive uncontrolled immigration. The far-right French politician Eric Zemmour prophesied, I quote, the great replacement of our European people by people coming from the south and of Muslim culture. There's little doubt the strains and fractures in English politics are widening at a speed almost nobody anticipated. Even though elections are still years away, polls show the Nigel Farage-led Reform Party is leading both Labour and the Conservatives by a very large distance. And even though figures show net immigration has actually been falling since this Labour government came to power, concern over the issue is at the highest levels since polling on it began in 1974. So what is the real issue here? And why is it grabbing so much intensity? 8 decades ago, the writer George Orwell described the English elite as, I quote, an aristocracy constantly recruited from parvenus. Like the knife which has 2 new blades and 3 new handles, Orwell argued, the English elite could constantly bring new weapons to the fight for power. The landowning aristocracy, as its wealth diminished in the 19th century, married into a new class of emerging plutocrats. The wealthy ship owner or cotton miller set up for himself an alibi as a country gentleman while his sons learnt the right mannerisms at public schools, Orwell observed. The rise of the famous Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who studied at the state-funded Kesteven and Grantham Girls' Grammar School before going on to Somerville College in Oxford, showed that this dynamism of class was still active in the 1950s and 1960s. A girl like Mrs. Thatcher simply wouldn't have had the opportunity for this kind of education a couple of generations earlier. Yet, structural changes had also begun to paralyze the English working class. The massive strikes of 1978 and 1979 demonstrated that the impressive gains made by the working class after the Second World War had begun to congeal and dissolve under the pressure of rampant inflation, historian Tara Martin Lopez has recorded in a superb book on the period. This was also a period less noticed today of seismic cultural change. The workers who came from across the former colonies to work on post-Second World War reconstruction began demanding their own cultural rights after a while. Famously, Sikh bus driver Tarsem Singh Sandhu fought in 1967 for the legal right to grow a beard and wear a turban, a case which he eventually won. English working class and middle class culture also came under a wider range of assault. The tumultuousness of this period is remarkable even by today's standards. Consensual gay sex was decriminalized, the right to an abortion recognized, and the pound was devalued in a desperate effort to cut imports. All of these had big consequences for a way of life the vast majority of English, Scottish, and Welsh people had taken for granted. Looking back, it's clear a rebellion against racial diversity and plural culture began to ignite in this same period. Following Tarsem Sandhu's turban protest, the rising conservative star politician Enoch Powell addressed his constituents in Walthamstow. To claim special communal rights, or I should say rights, leads to a dangerous fragmentation of society, Powell proclaimed in a now infamous 1968 speech. In this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, he prophesied, the black man will have the whip over the white man. This kind of language had in fact begun to embed itself in British conservative politics and substantial swathes of the Labour Party as well through the 1960s. In the early 1960s, conservative populists like the Member of Parliament Cyril Osborne had argued against allowing immigration from former colonies. In one interview, Osborne proclaimed England was, and I quote, a white man's country and I wish it to remain so. In the course of the notorious 1964 election campaign to Smethwick, Conservative candidate Peter Griffith used flagrantly racist language for his voters. This was one slogan, if you want a nigger neighbour, vote Liberal or Labour. The Labour incumbent, Shadow Home Secretary Patrick Gordon Walker, lost on a 7.2% swing to the Conservatives, which showed that hate paid. Figures on the economic right wing of the Conservative Party like Edward Boyle and Ian MacLeod pushed back against this kind of politics. They understood that immigrants were playing a critical role in stopping wages from spiraling upwards. Fears of unrest, together with these arguments, led to-be Prime Minister Edward Heath to sack Powell from his shadow cabinet and try to marginalize the race issue. The credit for crushing the English far right, though, must go to Prime Minister Thatcher, though her own personal racism is pretty evident. Early in 1978, Thatcher, who was then about to become Prime Minister, voiced white fears that, I quote, this country might be swamped by people with a different culture. Following those remarks, Daniel Trilling notes, there was a dramatic shift in support away from Labour. Thatcher's apparent hard line on immigration allowed her to defeat her opponents. But Thatcher also set in place the foundations of official multiculturalism, sociologist Jenny Bourne argues, enshrining a kind of informal apartheid that divided immigrant groups into distinct ethnic religious enclaves, focusing on their purported cultural needs. Farage, the son of a stockbroker who studied at a fee-paying private school and then skipped university to work directly as a commodities trader, came from a much more traditional conservative background than Thatcher. Farage's great insight, Tim Montgomery argues in an excellent article, was to realize that the Conservatives, like Labour, had started becoming creatures of the City of London. The Conservative Party built by Prime Minister David Cameron, with figures you've heard of like Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch, Nadeem Zahawi, Sajid Javed, Rahman Chishti, was much more monotone than it seemed. They were overwhelmingly from private schools and from families that were personally rich. All of the influential Tories live in London, Montgomery observed. They imbibe its prosperity, its multiculturalism, its skyline full of cranes, its sexual liberation, and its internationalism. But London, for all of its qualities, is only a part of Britain. There is another Britain where wages are depressed, where working hours are long, and where globalization can be more of a problem than a blessing. Farage's United Kingdom Independence Party spoke directly to these concerns. Even though Farage failed to make even a marginal dent to elections in London, he steadily expanded UKIP's reach in rural and small town England. Here, immigrants, mainly from Europe, were rightly or wrongly seen as threats to already perilously low wages. Traditionalists were also shocked with Prime Minister Cameron's decision to legalise same-sex marriage. London and its values seem to be overrunning England. There's no telling what now comes next. But England seems destined to see complex, painful, and even violent processes of accommodation. Less than 1 in 7 relationships in the United Kingdom cuts across racial lines. In South Asian communities, the killings of daughters who choose to marry for love remain a depressing part of the landscape. And for the most part, communities remain profoundly ghettoized, with few spaces where genuine social interaction between young people of different races can take place. You have, if you like, a thali, but no melting pot. As early as 2018, a United Nations Special Rapporteur warned of, I quote, structural socio-economic exclusion of racial and ethnic communities in the UK, as well as the growth in the acceptability of explicit racial, ethnic, and religious intolerance. For 4 generations, England's racial groups have ignored this problem and ended up slowly pushing each other ever closer to the precipice, hoping their walled-off lives will insulate them from the tide of hate that's rising all around. The weekend's march should demonstrate, if nothing else, that time for a genuine, serious national conversation is running out. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.